Okay, welcome everybody. Welcome to Lives of the Saints with Jeremy and I. I'm gonna do this one, and I'm actually kind of nervous, Jeremy, because I've never had to do this yet. So
Oh, no, you've done a lot of reading.
I've done a lot of reading. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now I gotta finagle the what do you call it all the things.
Sharing your screen and all that?
Yeah, but I can do it. I can.
Oh, okay. You can do it. You got this. You got this. You're
Everybody
pro.
will be patient with me anyway.
Yeah, you've been streaming for years.
Mhm.
You'd be fine. You'd be fine.
But
And you're with a very forgiving audience. So
I'm not as confident as I seem to be. Just so you know.
well, that's all right. You don't have
Welcome,
to share your secrets.
welcome Tim, and welcome Stephen. Nice to have you guys here. Garth, what's this?
This isn't an election stream.
Nope.
Oh, nope.
Nope, this is not. We're
not
going
to
to
do that.
some things
There's
later.
plenty of places you can go to learn about that, and I'm sure I will be going to those places after this stream.
Yeah,
But we didn't want to give up this ritual.
No, actually, I feel like this is the best thing we could be doing.
I couldn't agree more.
According to the news I've been hearing, you're not going to find out who's elected for a couple of days, anyways, for some strange reason.
I was just saying a little while ago, my grandmother was one of the high up officials in the Democrat Party of Utah before I was born. And they counted all the votes on the night of the election, and they did it with tally marks and chalkboards and rotary telephones and Polaroids, so they would count it all up because it's just counting, and then they would put the results up on a chalkboard. People were calling out, and then they would take a Polaroid of the chalkboard and then call in the results, and that's that. So to me, it's very frustrating that they get all the computers involved and try to make it more complex than it really is, and scanning and all that stuff. It's not. It should be citizens volunteering and counting, because it's just counting.
Well, I just was checking here because there's a canton in Switzerland called Appenzell, and they have a 700-year tradition of open-air assembly in which citizens make key political decisions by a show of hands.
There you go.
They still do it. 700 years they've been doing it.
Yeah. No.
That'll be a little difficult in New York City.
Arm will get tired. They're like, "Are you counting me right now? Because I'm going to put my arm down."
Yeah.
We felt the same. We felt the same. It's more important to put first things first, right? That's why we pray in the morning, we pray at night, so that we're remembering the most important things every day. So
they frame things for us. All right, I've got a couple of stories here. Let me see. Showing hands for the win. Yeah.
No AI that way. Yeah. Well, they'd probably use AI to count the people with their hands up.
And I think in Appenzell, actually, women just got the vote sometime either the late 60s or early 70s in that canton, because they had a rule that only people who served in the military could vote. And no women were allowed to serve in the military. So
there you go.
Anyway, okay, I'm going to do a screen sharing thing here. I'm going to preempt it.
You can do it.
Share screen.
You can flub it as well as I can, so I'm sure it'll be fine.
Okay, I'm gonna start with this. I'm gonna start with a little information first that I thought was kind of cool. So we're doing St. Brigid. Let me see, where are we here? There we go.
Did you scan your book in? That's crazy.
No, I didn't scan my book.
Can you make it bigger though? I cannot read that.
Yeah, I'm not reading from here.
Oh, okay.
I just wanted to let you know that what I'm going to be reading from was put together by a woman. Is that the Russian Orthodox Church? Roka? That webpage?
Yeah, Rokor, yeah.
Well, it
Yeah,
says
it's the Russian Orthodox Church outside of Russia.
Okay, well, she used some of the information in that, what I'm going to read, she used from this book called The Book of Lismore, which was put together in 1480. And it's basically an Irish Lives of the Saints, Jeremy.
Nice.
And it's, so the first half of the book is, what do you call it? Gaelic. And the second half is, it's all translated into English, and it's just full of stories. So there's like, I think there's, I'm not very good at navigating this website here, but this is, oh no, I have to go over here. Sorry. I have to go to my thing, there's like, I think there's like 10 pages of the life of St. Brigid.
Wow.
Yeah, in this book. All kinds of little stories. Yeah. Anyway, I just wanted to share that with you because she takes from this, and here's the page that I'm going to read from. Now, what does that look like over here? Oh no, I got to share that again. Okay. Yeah, I don't know what I'm doing.
That's okay.
Share screen.
You can do it.
I can do
I
it.
actually have speaking of Irish saints, one of the very first icons I ever got, actually, it might have been the first icon I ever got, was St. Columba.
Okay.
From Ireland. And, we went to it was early on when we were, barely catechumens. We went to a open house of a church that was being built in our area. I mean, it was like the celebration of like the opening, it was like a, housewarming party for the church, basically. Right. We went there and they had a big auction, a silent auction. And one of the baskets had a bunch of stuff from Celtic saints. There was somebody who had St. Brigid as their patron saint. And so they had a bunch of Celtic Orthodox stuff in a big basket. And my wife was really excited about it. And so she got in a bidding war with this other lady. And I got an icon of St. Columba out of it, which was really great.
Oh, that's cool.
So,
okay, I'm going to see if I can. I don't know how to make this bigger, Jeremy. Can you give me some?
Yeah. Hold down Control and use your mouse wheel, or you can do Control Plus on that window.
On a Mac.
Okay. Command Plus. Command Shift Plus.
Oh gosh.
Where's I know. Command Shift Plus, like that's up by the delete key.
Command Shift Plus.
Hey, look at that! It keeps getting. Do it again. Do it again.
Whoops! Where'd I go?
Uh-oh, wrong button.
Cancel. We don't want to do that. Let's get out of here. Where are we here? I'm back here again. It was over here. Maybe I can just go here. Oh, here, look, zoom. Tell me when.
Yeah.
Is that good?
Yeah, we can see that. I can see that.
Is that good?
There we go. Yeah. I can see that now. That's great.
Let me see how that looks for you. I'm going to look. Okay, that's good.
Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna just start reading.
Okay, I'll mute.
The life of St. Brigid of Ireland offers us new insight into the virtue of hospitality, the cheerful, generous giving of food and shelter. We know that this virtue is praised throughout the scriptures. The hospitality of Abraham to 3 young men who visited him was revealed to be offered to none other than the 3 persons of the Holy Trinity. In fact, it is in the forms of these 3 young visitors that the Holy Trinity is most often represented in iconography. Our Lord Jesus Christ commanded us to offer hospitality when he said, "For I was hungry and you gave me meat. I was thirsty and you gave me drink. I was a stranger and you took me in." Of course, the law of nature also urges us to generously provide for the traveler who has no place to lay his head. And so hospitality, even without the love of Christ, has become an important facet of civilized culture. In pre-Christian Ireland, every free man was required by secular law to provide hospitality to anyone of or below his own class who asked it of him. The type and quality of food and shelter he was obliged to offer varied depending on the class of his guest, but he was expected to provide well for noble and low-born alike. or be subjected to heavy fines as well as social ostracism. St. Brigid took this legal and social obligation of her people, and by infusing it with the love of Christ, transformed it into a holy rule and a godly art. Brigid was born at Fogart in County Down in 452, less than 50 years after the beginning of St. Patrick's widespread missionary efforts among the Irish. At the time of her birth, the faith was just starting to grow great in the hearts of the Irish people. But by the end of her life, and partly through her efforts, her land would become Holy Ireland, a land of saints and scholars, a land of monasteries from which missionaries would go forth to all of Europe and beyond. As if to ensure that she would understand and care for all people, both lawborn and, I think this should be lowborn, excuse me, both lowborn and high, Brigid was born the daughter of a king and a slave. Her father was Dubtach, a pagan chieftain, and her mother was his Christian bondswoman. Brigid was raised to be, as her mother, a servant and a Christian. Dubtach's jealous wife forced him to sell Brigid's mother before the babe was born, and so Brigid was raised in the household of a druid of Fogart. This druid had a Christian uncle who recognized and supported the piety of the young Brigid. Although she often suffered want, she was kind to both people and animals, and especially to the poor, for whom she provided as best she could from her own humble circumstances. At the age of about 10, she chose to return to her father's house, where she lived well and acquired a nobility of bearing, which no doubt was an asset to her in her later position of leadership. For the Irish of her time were a people acutely aware of social status. Brigid's truest nobility, however, was in her generosity. At her father's home, she shocked the household by distributing to the poor most of the food at her disposal. Furthermore, she later decided to return to a life of slavery in order to help her mother, who had become ill. Taking over her mother's work in the dairy, Brigid would divide the butter she churned into 13 parts, one for each of the 12 apostles and one larger part of our Lord, which she would distribute to the poor. When her Druid master discovered her generosity with his goods, he came to the dairy to confront her. She welcomed him, washed his feet, and prepared food for him. The Druid could see nothing amiss, yet he determined to test Brigid and commanded her to fill a great vessel with butter. Finding that she did not have enough butter to fulfill his request because she had given so much to the needy, Brigid began to pray. O my prince, who canst do all these things, bless, O God, my kitchen with thy right hand. My kitchen, the kitchen of the white God, a kitchen which my king hath blessed, a kitchen that hath butter. Mary's son, my friend, cometh to bless my kitchen. The prince of the world to the border, may we have abundance with him. And I believe that that's in that book of Lismore, that little verse. There's a few of them in here. Abundance is indeed what she received. Through her prayers, the butter multiplied in such large amounts that her Druid master was brought to believe in Christ through the miracle. He freed her mother and served Brigid for the rest of his life. He also heaped gifts upon Brigid, including the butter and all his cows. But she had prayed for abundance not for herself, but for others. So she distributed her own wealth among the poor even more freely than she had distributed his. In fact, many of the incidents of Brigid's life involve her being blessed with plenty so that she could give it away. So it was even with the blessing of her legendary beauty. Brigid was tall and regal of stature, with fair white skin and golden hair, a true Celtic beauty. So when her father, irate at what he considered her irresponsible generosity with his goods, determined to marry her off, he had no trouble finding a good match. But Brigid refused not only the young poet her father chose for her, but the idea of marriage altogether, insisting that she must belong only to God. When her father tried to force her to marry, she disfigured her face so that no man would want her. At this, Dubtach acquiesced, and Brigid was tonsured a nun at about the age of 18 by Moel, Bishop of Armagh. When she was allowed thus to give herself to Christ, her face was restored to its former beauty. At this time, no monasteries for women existed in Ireland, and only a few for men. Women who were consecrated as nuns had to struggle to live their monastic calling while in secular households. But Brigid determined to offer these women a place of refuge, and in the same year of her tonsure, 470 AD, she gathered together 7 other nuns and approached the local king to petition a piece of land upon which to build a monastery. It is told that when he refused, she said that she would be content with whatever her mantle would cover. He, in whose name Brigid provided for others, again provided for her, causing her mantle to spread out until it covered the Curragh, a huge expanse of open, fertile land, which can be seen in County Kildare to this day. There Brigid founded Kildare Monastery, Ireland's first monastery for women, which became a great centre of piety, learning, craftsmanship, and of course hospitality. The virtue of hospitality, aflame with the love of Christ, was one especially important to St. Brigid as Abbess of Kildare. From the 5th to the 9th century in Ireland, monasteries were not only places where men and women turned their hearts away from the world and toward the things of God, they were also centers, heart centers, if you will, for both the spiritual and cultural lives of these pious people living in the world. The early Celtic Church was administered not through the Roman form of the diocese, but through the Eastern form of the monastic family or parish. Of course, since the Great Schism had not yet occurred, all of Christendom, both Western and Eastern, belonged to the one Holy Catholic and Orthodox Church. The Celtic Church was a monastic church. Throughout the Celtic countries were scattered monasteries, increasingly more as Christianity grew stronger, which were the center of commerce, learning, and cultural life, as well as of spiritual life. The governing head of the monastery was the abbot or abbess, while sometimes an additional bishop cared for the sacramental needs of the people. Because neither cities nor hotels existed, these monasteries were important stopping places for travelers. In fact, they were usually situated on or near main routes, and so were convenient places of rest. As in a secular home, the kitchen or hearth is the heart center, where a virtuous woman offers warmth and nourishment to the weary laborer or traveler. So the monastery was a heavenly heart center, where men and women of God received their world-weary brethren and fed them with both the food of heaven and the good things of the earth in Christ's name. The words heart and hearth are almost identical, as are their Anglo-Saxon root words, hiort and hiroth. The welcoming hearth of the monastery was truly the heart of Ireland, in both a spiritual and a material sense. And so Mother Brigid was both nun and dairymaid, both abbess and hostess, and is venerated today in all of these capacities. Only a few facts regarding Kildare Monastery remain to us today. We know that it began as a small monastic house for women only, but that as all that Brigid put her hand to, it quickly grew great. Soon it was a large double monastery for both men and women, and Abbess Brigid asked a bishop, St. Conleth, to reside there to minister to their sacramental needs. St. Conleth was a metal craftsman who taught the monks the fine art of metallurgy, and Kildare became known for its exquisite chalices, missal covers, and other sacramental objects. In addition, beautiful illuminated manuscripts and books were produced there. Both the women and men participated in hard manual labor, caring for cows and sheep, tending the dairy, and raising vegetables. The women spun and wove the material for the simple monastic clothing, as well as for the fine vestments and altar cloths. Abbess Brigid provided an example for them by tending her own cows and sheep, churning, spinning, and weaving. Their own diet was probably a very simple one, consisting of bread, milk products, vegetables, and occasionally fish. But for guests, it was an established practice to prepare the finest and tastiest dishes that they were able. From our knowledge of other monasteries of their time, we can assume that Kildare's monks and nuns kept the hours of prayer, which centered on the chanting of the Psalms, and that they spent much time in study not only of the Holy Scriptures, but also of uplifting literature in Gaelic, Latin, and Greek, so that the atmosphere into which a guest was received was scholarly and cultured as well as holy. Excuse me. We also know something about Kildare, and by inference about Brigid herself, from what her 7th century biographer Cogitasus wrote about the church that she erected there. He describes it as a many-windowed building of generous proportions, whose walls were covered with beautiful paintings, which were most certainly were icons. Its iconostasis was adorned with linen hangings, fine objects of gold and silver, also beautified this house of God. Such spaciousness and lavish decorations were not at all typical of the churches of this period. Catherine Sherman, in The Flowering of Ireland, notes that no other churches of its time compare to it, and suggests that its largeness and ornateness are a monument to the generosity and fervor of Brigid's nature. In addition to the facts which come down to us about St. Brigid and the monastery she founded, we have a rich store of pious legend passed on through the centuries by those who have loved and venerated her. Many of these stories bear witness to Brigid's largeness of heart and openness of hand. It is told, for example, how, when 7 bishops came to Kildare to visit her, she was shamed to discover that she had no food with which to receive them. When she prayed hard for help, angels visited her and bade her to milk her cows for the 3rd time that day. Ordinarily, a 3rd milking would yield next to no milk, but when Brigid obediently milked her cows, the vessels overflowed with milk, and she had more than plenty for her guests. A wonderful poem attributed to St. Brigid tells of the things she most wished for. If it was not composed by the saint herself, then surely by someone who loved her and knew her well, and knew well her nature. I would wish a great lake of ale for the King of Kings. I would wish the family of heaven to be drinking it throughout life and time. I would wish the men of heaven in my own house. I would wish vessels of peace to be given to them. I would wish joy to be in their drinking. I would wish Jesu to be here among them. I would wish the 3 Marys of great name. I would wish the people of heaven from every side. I would wish to be a rent payer to the prince. The way, if I was in trouble, he would give me a good blessing. It is said that the Lord would grant Brigid anything she would ask, and that what she desired was always the same, quote, to satisfy the poor, to banish every hardship, and to save every sorrowful man, unquote. It seems that in her love for others, St. Brigid truly forgot herself and allowed the loving providence of God to sustain her. The ancient book of Lismore records that St. Brigid was abstinent, she was innocent, she was prayerful, she was patient, she was glad in God's commandments, she was firm, she was loving, she was a consecrated casket for keeping Christ's body and his blood. She was a temple of God, her heart and mind were a throne of rest for the Holy Ghost. Surely such fervent love for God was the first cause and sustaining power of her love for others, and the Christian hospitality she gave them. This is what makes the difference between a philanthropist and a saint, for it was not only food, drink, and lodging which Brigid provided, but the blessings of God upon all who came to her door. And conversely, it was Christ that she saw and loved and provided for in everyone. She is quoted as saying, "It is in the name of Christ that I feed the poor, for Christ is in the body of every poor man." The hospitality of St. Brigid, a giving in and of Christian charity, offered such a powerful example that it set the standard for hospitality of the Irish people, as is reflected in the Irish rune of hospitality. I saw a stranger yestreen. I put food in the eating place, to drink in the drinking place, music in the listening place, and in the name of the Triune, he blessed myself and my house, my cattle and my dear ones, and the lark said in her song, often, often, often goes the Christ in the stranger's guise. Often, often, often goes the Christ in the stranger's guise. May we follow St. Brigid's example and receive the Christ in the stranger's guise. St. Brigid, pray to God for us.
Amen.
I love that story.
Yeah, it's very beautiful.
Yeah.
There was another one I was reading today. Let me see if I can find it. there was like a specific story from her life that was really, let's see. Oh,
I also
yeah.
have,
Can I share a story from her life?
sure,
Or
but
you
I
do
just
want-
wanted, I just wanted to show the two or the icons.
Oh, yeah.
Here.
Great.
Because that one didn't have icons. Let me just make sure this is the right one. Yeah, this one here. So this is from Orthodox Road. And can you see those okay? Or should I make them bigger?
Yeah, that's fine.
Let me make them bigger here.
It's pretty small, but there we go. That's better.
How's that?
Oh, yeah, that's a lot better. If you scroll down a little bit now.
Yeah.
Other way.
So there's
Other down.
one.
There we go.
Is it good?
Yep. Now I can see it.
And in her hand it says, "Since I first fixed my mind on God, I have never taken it off." And she's carrying
That's prayer right there.
Yeah. She's carrying the cross that she's famous for, the St. Brigid's cross. And then there's another one down here.
Oh, beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
That's a great icon.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you have a picture of the St. Brigid cross?
Well, there's another icon here. Wait, let me find this again. I don't have
I have a goddaughter, Brigid.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. My wife made a St. Brigid cross for her last name day. The tradition is to make them on the eve of St. Brigid's name day. Her name day is the 2nd of February. And so the tradition is to make her cross on the 1st of February. Maybe I have it. Oh, no, look, I was wrong. It's on the 31st of January is when you make it because her name day is the 1st. Sorry, I was off by a day.
Right. Okay, so there, I don't know if you can see it there.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, clear.
And I don't know how to make one, but I should learn how to do that. That'd be cool.
They're pretty easy. There's a video of a guy from Ireland making one, and it's pretty simple.
Yeah.
Here, I'll share a picture of where to go. Present, share screen, window. That one, that'll work.
Oh, sorry.
That's all right. So the tradition is to make it out of rushes, which is like a grass. It's like a rigid grass that grows in like wetlands.
I have lots of those growing in around my lake.
Yeah, perfect. You can make St. Brigid's crosses.
I could. Very nice.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
So what's the story that you wanted to tell?
Oh, yeah. Okay.
There's lots of stories of hers, and I have this little book, by the way, that I got on Michael Martin recommended it.
Yeah.
And it's actually a children's storybook, which is really cool. It was written in 1920, I think. Oh no, 1900.
Wow.
It's the Book of Saints and Friendly Beasts, and the first story in here is St. Brigid and the King's Wolf. And I looked for it online, and it's just a mythological tale. So
yeah, those kind of get woven into hagiography, and I really don't have a problem with it. I think, because the saints are revealing heavenly patterns, so it's like,
and that's
where they try to get like, oh, this is the science part of what we know about the saint. This is the non-science part. It's like
there's so much mythology around St. Brigid.
Yeah, exactly.
Like
same with St. George, my patron saint. It's just like,
guys, there you go.
Let it be
dragons and
hagiography. Was it really a dragon, or was it a representative of the Roman? Like, shut up.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah, this story is really beautiful.
Yeah, this is really great. The miracles performed by St. Brigid are too numerous to relate here, but perhaps one story will suffice. One evening, the holy abbess was sitting with the blind nun, Dara. From sunset to sunrise, they spoke of the joys of the kingdom of heaven and of the love of Christ, losing all track of time. St. Brigid was struck by the beauty of the earth and sky in the morning light. Realizing that Sister Dara was unable to appreciate this beauty, she became very sad. Then she prayed and made the sign of the cross over Dara's eyes. All at once, the blind nun's eyes were opened, and she saw the sun in the east, and the trees, and the flowers sparkling with dew. She looked for a while, then turned to St. Brigid and said, "Close my eyes again, dear mother, for when the world is visible to the eyes, then God is seen less clearly by the soul." St. Brigid prayed again, and Dara became blind once more.
Mm-hmm. So that's the one thing that the story didn't tell was any actual. Well, it talked about the multiplying the butter and stuff. The one that I read, but the other thing I wanted, maybe you could look it up, Jeremy. I was going to ask you to because you're better at these, faster.
Yeah.
The monastery at Kildare, and St. Brigid is buried with her relics. There's a story too about her head being carried somewhere. I can't remember.
Yeah, it got carried to Portugal,
right,
just outside of Lisbon.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was when there was a war going on, and they took her skull to Portugal, and then parts of them were returned to Ireland in the 1900s, and they built it when they were building a church for her.
Right.
And so they got some of her relics from there and brought them back because the rest of her relics were lost in that war.
So she's buried with Patrick and Columba, by the way. In what's it called here? Where is it?
I'm looking for
there's
images.
Maybe you could find some pictures of where that Downpatrick Cathedral in Northern Ireland.
Yeah, this is Kildare.
Kildare.
So that looks like an art from the older church.
Yeah. Well, the actually the site where the monastery was where a great oak grew, Vocarium, and
there we go. There's the
remnants. The Church of the Oak.
Oh, no, that's from Abbey. Sorry, I talked over you. Please go ahead.
Well, it was called the Church of the Oak, and there's a little bit about that in this children's story. What if we have time, I could read it. It's not very long. Actually.
Sure.
And these round towers, I was in Northern Ireland years and years ago, and I saw some of these round towers there. They're so amazing. Like, that's not a good one. Like, they had these like monk towers. They were just like pillars. They were like
a skylight.
Yeah, but they were actual towers, like,
Wow.
And then they had these little. They look like something out of Lord of the Rings, to be honest.
Yeah.
But they're tall.
Wow.
So this is it?
I mean, that's the best I could. Yeah. I mean,
it's no longer
Kildare Monastic Trail.
Okay.
So I think that's this visit
Well,
page.
can you look up that church? Let me give you the name now. It's down.
Oh yeah, this is Kildare. This is the monastery. Yeah. Here's the inside.
Okay.
That's a full cross.
Yeah, this is the Celtic cross. So Downpatrick Cathedral.
Okay.
Is where they're buried. So maybe we could have a look at that. Downpatrick Cathedral.
Pretty nice.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, here's the inside.
Yeah.
That's phenomenal. It's a low resolution picture, but it's very beautiful.
Yeah. Okay, so those are the three main saints of Ireland: Brigid, Patrick, and Columba.
Mm-hmm.
And I should know more about it because my maiden name is actually Irish.
Oh.
My dad's side of the family is. I thought at one point that my my dad was like 5th or 6th generation Canadian, but it turns out he's only 2nd generation. I was really surprised. I thought I was more
Old
rooted.
stock. Wow.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll stop sharing now. Yeah, no, I thought that story of the, it reminded me of my favorite scripture. I see men as trees walking, right? When Christ
Yeah.
healed that man's eyes. And it was, although this one had a little bit different twist to it, where she said, when I can see with my eyes, I can't see God with my soul as well.
It's so funny because when I read that, I read that story too, and I thought right away of Meister Eckhart talking about not seeing God with your eyes. Like if 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 you think that what you're looking at with these eyes is God, it's not. That's what he says.
Yeah.
Just flat out. Like, Oh,
Yeah.
hang on a second.
Sure. Yeah, there's a similar story where there's an archbishop. I can't remember his name. Anyway, he said that in prayer, eventually you can get to the point where you find out and you experience that all of your concepts and ideas about God are all idols. And that you
Right.
can only truly know God through encounter. Metropolitan Jonah, that's who it was. He said that one time. He was talking about prayer, and he said that eventually you can have an encounter with God where you learn that every idea you had about God is an idol.
Right. I mean, that's kind of what I've heard Thomas Aquinas has said. He said, just everything that I ever wrote was straw, just burn it. He had some kind of mystical experience,
Yeah, at the end of his life. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I'm sure there's so little that we know. Yeah. I have
Well,
actually been
I think
listening.
Gabriel talked about that in his did you get a chance to read his homily or not his homily, but his interpretation of Psalm 50?
No, I never did that yet. It's been a
Okay.
crazy week for me. So
Yeah, I know. You don't have to share that. You don't have to go into detail. You
No.
told me that offline, but
Yeah.
there was a line in there, because he was talking about the one phrase in Psalm 50 where it says, "The hidden and secret things of thy wisdom hast thou made manifest unto me."
Mm-hmm.
And he was asking the woman, "Do you know what that means?" And she was like, "No." And so he was talking about the hidden and secret things, and he said that the secret things are revealed to you, but they are beyond language, and you have to be able to get to, like, through the grace of God, you get to a point where you don't have thoughts. And she said,
Right.
"Don't have thoughts? How is that even possible?" And he said, "If you had a thought, it would immediately block you from experiencing God."
This is exactly. Uh, Unfortunately, Meister Eckhart's not an Orthodox saint, but thank you so much, Upcycle. You're just amazing. Just amazing. Thank you so much. But Meister Eckhart talks about that in his Christmas sermon, that the ground of the soul is the place of no images. And what I find really fascinating about that is that if there are no images, there's no language, because language is derived from the representations around you, right?
Yeah.
And he's also, he doesn't make it explicit, but I think he's also playing on not making any graven images, right? Like God is not found in those images. So yes, I love it too, Eugene. Yeah. So yeah, so that's that's what the mystics say, and I've read some of the Jewish ones, and they say the same thing. It's a place of no images, it's a place of no language, and it's also a virginal space where only God can enter. So that's always really interesting to me.
Yeah, there's that monastic book from medieval Europe called The Cloud of Unknowing as well.
I've been listening to it,
that.
and it's absolutely incredible.
Yeah.
You know, if anybody's interested in the Celtic saints or Celtic Christianity, because it's really quite fascinating. There's a series on YouTube by a guy named Peter Brown. It's a 4-part series on the Celtic saints. He starts with St. Patrick, and he talks about the connection to the Desert Fathers, because, and he's a scholar. Maybe if you bring it up, we can just share screen, and so people can actually see.
Sure, I'll pull it up real quick.
What it looks. We can't play it, but we can show them what it looks like. Because what these Celtic monks had, or ascetics, was the Philokalia and the Psalter. That's all they had. And I would really love, like, how did Peter Brown put it? He put it in the series that I watched. The distance between the desert and Ireland was not as far away, it was not as far as you would have thought, right? Like, they were very influenced by the Desert Fathers. And so, yeah. Have you found it?
Yeah. It took me a second. There's some other Peter Browns there. So
yeah, he's quite the guy. He's a really interesting, and he's such a joy to listen to, I'm telling you. He's got this classic English accent.
Yeah. Yeah, that's half the reason I like listening to Martin Shaw. He just it's just enrapturing. It's captivating. You can tell he's spent his whole life studying the craft of storytelling. Yeah, it's quite beautiful.
This is it.
Oh yeah, is that it? Okay, there we go.
Lectures by, so highly recommend. They're not even long. What is this one? 35 minutes?
35 minutes, yeah. There's
4 of them.
Looks like there's 6. And no, there's 4. Yeah, you're right. And
4
then
there's
the Silk Road and Land Antiquity, and another lecture by him in this playlist.
Yeah. But these 3 are really, really good. 4, I'm sorry. If anybody's interested in Celtic Christianity, he goes through them, and what does he call Patricios? Because he was a Roman. He was actually a Roman kid. He got kidnapped, and he talks about the tribes, of Ireland, and they were called the Scotties, which is not what you would expect.
Yeah.
Because they would rob the like, they were like pirates, right? And they were quite feared, and quite and Patrick was taken he was just kidnapped from his, I think he was like a kid working in the fields or something.
Wow.
Yeah. Kidnapped and taken as a slave for many years, and then he went back. He chose to go back. So yeah, these are
sounds
amazing.
Great. Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah, and like I said, I'd really love to dig in more to these Celtic saints. So do you guys want to hear? Just give me a thumbs up in the chat if you want to hear this little children's story. Let me see. How many pages? 3 pages. It's not long.
I bet they do. What else are they going to do?
I don't want to bore them with a kid's story.
No, go for it. That's why they're here. They're here for the lives of the saints. It's good.
All right.
Let's hear it. For the people who came late, now they'll get the children's version of the life of
bedtime stories, kids, on election night.
Good night, Moon.
Good night, Moon. Okay, this is called Saint Brigid and the King's Wolf. Everyone has heard of Brigid, the little girl saint of Ireland. Her name is almost as well known as that of Saint Patrick, who drove all the snakes from the island. Saint Brigid had long golden hair, and she was very beautiful. Many wonderful things happened to her that are written in famous books. But I suspect that you never heard what she did about the king's wolf. It is a queer story. Now remember, this book is written in 1900, okay?
Hmm.
This is how it happened. The King of Ireland had a tame wolf which some hunters had caught for him when it was a wee baby. And this wolf ran around as it pleased in the king's park near the palace and had a very good time. But one morning he got over the high wall which surrounded the park and strayed a long distance from home, which was a foolish thing to do. For in those days, wild wolves were hated and feared by the people, whose cattle they often stole. And if a man could kill a wicked wolf, he thought himself a very smart fellow indeed. Moreover, the king himself had offered a prize to any man who should bring him a dead wolf. For he wanted his kingdom to be a peaceful, happy one, where the children could play in the woods all day without fear of big eyes or big teeth. Of course, you can guess what happened to the king's wolf. A big, silly country fellow was going along with his bow and arrows when he saw a great brown beast leap over a hedge and dash into the meadow beyond. It was only the king's wolf running away from home and feeling very frisky because it was the first time that he had done such a thing. But the country fellow did not know all that. "Aha," he said to himself, "I'll soon have you, my fine wolf, and the king will give me a gold piece that will buy me a hat and a new suit of clothes for the holidays." And without stopping to think about it or to look closely at the wolf who had the king's mark upon his ear, the fellow shot his arrow straight as a string. The king's wolf gave one great leap into the air and then fell dead on the grass, poor fellow. The countryman was much pleased. He dragged his prize straight up to the king's palace and thumped on the gate. "Open," he cried, "open to the valiant hunter who has shot a wolf for the king. Open that I may go in to receive the reward." So very respectfully they bade him enter, and the Lord Chamberlain escorted him before the king himself, who sat on a great red velvet throne in the hall. In came the fellow, dragging after him by the tail the limp body of the king's wolf. "What have we here?" growled the king, as the Lord Chamberlain made a low bow and pointed with his staff to the stranger. The king had a bad temper and did not like to receive callers in the morning. But the silly countryman was too vain of his great deed to notice the king's disagreeable frown. "You have here a wolf, sire," he said proudly. I have shot for you a wolf, and I have come to claim the promised reward." But at this unlucky moment, the king started up with an angry cry. He had noticed his mark on the wolf's right ear. "Ho! Seize the villain!" he shouted to his soldiers. "He has slain my tame wolf. He has shot my pet. Away with him to prison, and tomorrow he dies." It was useless for the poor man to scream and cry and try to explain that it was all a mistake. The king was furious. His wolf was killed, and the murderer must die. In those days, this was the way kings punished men who displeased them in any way. There were no delays. Things happened very quickly. So they dragged the poor fellow off to a dark, damp dungeon and left him there howling and tearing his hair, wishing that wolves had never been saved from the flood by Noah and his ark. Now, not far from this place, little St. Brigid lived. When she chose the beautiful spot for her home, there were no houses near, only a great oak tree, under which she built her little hut. It had but one room, and the roof was covered with grass and straw. It seemed almost like a doll's playhouse. It was so small. And Brigid herself was like a big golden-haired wax doll, the prettiest doll you have ever seen. She was so beautiful and so good that people wanted to live near her, where they could see her sweet face often and hear her voice. When they found where she had built her cell, men came flocking from all the country round about with their wives and children and their household goods, their cows and pigs and chickens, and camping on the green grass under the great oak tree, they said, "We will live here too, where St. Brigid is." So house after house was built, and a village grew up about her little cell. And for a name,
Water break. Oh, cough break. I'll take the reins for a second. What do you think's going to happen next to the simple countryman? Is St. Brigid going to come and save him? Or will he perish in despair as she walks unknowingly past him as he suffers the fate of making the king angry first thing in the morning? You'll have to tune in next week to hear the end of this beautiful tale. We've come to the end. No, I'm just kidding. You'll get to hear it tonight.
Sorry about that.
No, not yet, though. We need more coughing first. Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
All right. So house after house was built, and a village grew up about her little cell. And for a name, it had Kildare, which in Irish means cell of little cell. Oh no, cell of the oak. Soon Kildare became so fashionable that even the king must have a palace and a park there. And it was in this park that the king's wolf had been killed. Now Brigid knew the man who had shot the wolf, and when she heard into what terrible trouble he had fallen, she was very sorry, for she was a kind-hearted little girl. She knew he was a silly fellow to shoot the tame wolf, but still it was all a mistake, and she thought he ought not to be punished so severely. She wished that she could do something to help him, to save him if possible, but this seemed difficult, for she knew what a bad temper the king had, and she also knew how proud he had been of that wolf, who was the only tame one in all the land. Brigid called for her coachman and with her chariot and a pair of white horses, and started for the king's palace, wondering what she should do to satisfy the king, and make him release the man who had meant to do no harm. But lo and behold, as the horses galloped along over the Irish bogs of peat, St. Brigid saw a great white shape racing towards her. At first she thought it was a dog, but no dog was as large as that. She soon saw that it was a wolf, with big eyes and with a red tongue lolling out of his mouth. At last he overtook the frightened horses, and with a flying leap came plump into the chariot where Brigid sat, and crouched at her feet quietly as a dog would. He was no tame wolf, but a wild one, who had never before felt a human being's hand upon him. Yet he let Brigid pat and stroke him, and say nice things into his great ear. And he kept perfectly still by her side, until the chariot rumbled up to the gate of the palace. Then Brigid held out her hand and called to him, and the great white beast followed her quietly through the gate, and up the stair and down the long hall, until they stood before the red velvet throne, where the king sat looking stern and sulky. They must have been a strange-looking pair, the little maiden in her green gown with her golden hair falling like a shower down to her knees, and the huge white wolf standing up almost as tall as she, his yellow eyes glaring fiercely about, and his red tongue panting. Brigid laid her hand gently on the beast's head, which was close to her shoulder, and bowed to the king. The king only sat and stared. He was so surprised at the sight, but Brigid took that as permission to speak. "You have lost your tame wolf, O king," she said, "but I have brought you a better. There is no other tame wolf in all the land. Now yours is dead. But look at this one. There is no white wolf to be found anywhere, and he is both tame and white. I have tamed him, my king. I, a little maiden, have tamed him so that he is gentle as you see. Look, I can pull his big ears, and he will not snarl. Look, I can put my little hand into his great red mouth, and he will not bite. Sire, I give him to you. Spare me then the life of the poor silly man who unwittingly killed your beast. Give his stupid life to me in exchange for this dear, amiable wolf." And she smiled pleadingly. The king sat staring first at the great white beast, wonderfully pleased with the look of him, then at the beautiful maiden whose blue eyes looked so wistfully at him, and he was wonderfully pleased with the look of them. Then he bade her to tell him the whole story, how she had come by the creature, and when and where. Now when she had finished, he first whistled in surprise, then he laughed. That was a good sign. He was wonderfully pleased with St. Brigid's story, It was so strange a thing for the king to laugh in the morning that the chamberlain nearly fainted from surprise. And Brigid felt sure that she had won her prayer. Never had the king been seen in such good humor, for he was a vain man, and it pleased him mightily to think of owning all for himself. This huge beast, whose like was not in all the land, and whose story was so marvelous. And when Brigid looked at him so beseechingly, he could not refuse those sweet blue eyes, the request which they made for fear of seeing them fill with tears. So as Brigid begged, he pardoned the countryman and gave his life to Brigid, ordering his soldiers to set him free from prison. Then, when she had thanked the king very sweetly, she bade the wolf lie down beside the red velvet throne and thenceforth be faithful and kind to his new master. And with one last pat on his shaggy head, she left the wolf and hurried out to take away the silly countryman in her chariot before the king should have time to change his mind. The man was very happy and grateful, but she gave him a stern lecture on the way home, advising him not to be so hasty and wasty next time. So there we have it.
Very beautiful. There's a lot
Right?
of great themes in that story. It's very beautiful.
Yeah. Yes,
Don't be so
it wasn't
hasty and
down.
wasty.
I just wanted to say about the coughing.
Oh yeah.
I have a terrible chest cold at the moment, and yeah, so that's what happened. Sorry about that, you guys.
No problem. Sorry you're sick. I'm just getting over a flu myself. You know, ever since the disease that shall not be named in 2020, like every time I get the flu, it's like a week or 10-day long ordeal now, and that was never the case.
Oh, really? Eh?
Yeah. I used to have really great immune system, and now it's like all the time. And I did not. I was not pierced to the door post.
No.
No. So it's not that. It's just, but it definitely. I mean, it seems to have affected my immune system. It's kind of
well. I actually think I might have pneumonia. It's been like 3 weeks, and
yeah,
it's really not good.
yeah.
And so tomorrow I'm going to go sit in the emergency room and get some chest X-rays because something's got to give here.
Yeah, it's not good.
Yeah, and then I saw a news report. Actually, saw a news report last week or something that walking pneumonia is like the hospitals in Canada are like filling up with people who have walking pneumonia, and I didn't know that it was contagious. It's actually contagious.
Oh yeah. So that's the bacterial pneumonia as opposed to the viral pneumonia. So the bacterial pneumonia is much more treatable, but not fun.
It really is.
The sickest I've ever had, the sickest I've ever been was bacterial pneumonia.
I've had it twice, Jeremy.
Oh man, it was rough. Yeah, like I had like involuntary convulsions just from the chills were so bad, and then laying in a hot bathtub with chills. That's not fun. It was miserable.
Yeah,
not fun.
I kind of thought I might have it again, but I was like, why would I have it again? Like but if it's contagious, then there's not much you can do about it.
Yeah.
So
it's a blessing. It's reminding you that you're weak and that you need to pray and repent.
Right.
That's what I try to take advantage of. I try to think, okay, this is God telling me I need to.
Oh heavens, I'm
taking for granted what He does, how He takes care of me.
Yeah,
and that He doesn't have to if He doesn't want to.
Well,
and if He doesn't, I'm in trouble. So
I'm so sorry, guys. I forgot to put a link in there. This is what happens when I have to tell the stories.
Oh no, you did a great job. I loved listening to you tell the story of St. Brigid. It's great.
Yeah. I wish I would have had a book like this to read to my kids.
Yeah, that's how I felt about George MacDonald. Oh my gosh, his stories for kids are so great. The Princess. I haven't finished it yet. I was reading with my family the one. What is it? I haven't read it for a few weeks. the one where she meets her grandmother up in the hidden floors of the castle.
I haven't read that one.
Oh, it's so good. It's really great. And then there's a boy who's from the village who works in the mines where all of the goblins live. Oh, it's so good.
Is
it's
it?
really fun. Oh, the Princess and the Goblin. That's what it is. Yeah.
The Princess and the Goblin, because there's the Princess and the Princess and the Goblin.
Yeah, that's a really good one. Well, I haven't finished it yet, so I can't say it's really good, but so far it's really good. It's really well written.
Catio says Princess and Goblin is his favorite.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. You know, I tried reading At the Back of the North Wind to my daughter when she was like 3, and I thought George MacDonald was a wingnut. I'm like, what is wrong with this person? Yeah. And there's also The Light Princess. It's a really short story. What an incredible story, though.
I don't think I've read that one. I'll have to look at that one.
Yeah.
I did read Lilith.
Oh, did you?
Yeah. It was a fun romp. I have to admit the end was it was like not as satisfying for my autistic brain as I was hoping for. It was a little too right brain for me. But like overall the journey was quite enjoyable. I really liked it.
Yeah.
I probably need to read it again and like slow down. I was in a race to get to the end and then I went, oh, oops, I didn't need a race to
I read it myself.
More time along the way.
I read it myself, and then it was in the early days. Actually, I was the person who started the book club on the writer server, the Bridges and Me writer server. And then, do you remember Andrea with the bangs?
Yes.
Okay, well, she wanted to do Lilith, so we did Lilith together, and I had already read it. Nobody else in the book club had read it. And Andrea was just, she's like, she has to know. She's like, what is happening? Like, I don't get this. Shari, can you tell me what's coming? And I'm like, no, I can't tell you. I'm not telling you,
Right. Yeah.
And who is she really? And like, what does the symbolism mean? And she was constantly doing that. It was really fun doing that with her. And then I'm trying to think of the guy's name right now. Maybe I'll post it on the Girl Country Discord Derek Holzer. He has a Substack, and he's been doing a series of conversations with Jordan Daniel Wood and Chris Green on Lilith, on George MacDonald. He discovered George MacDonald, and he's like head over heels in love with George MacDonald. So, and I watched a couple of them. With one with just Jordan and one with Jordan and Chris Green, and they were so good.
Yeah.
So if anybody's curious about Lilith or has read Lilith and wants to know more, get like deeper into it,
a little more exposition.
Yeah. There's Eugene.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello.
Good evening.
Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Yeah, I have to read The Princess and the Goblin and The Princess and the Curdy. I got caught up in Lilith, Fantastes, and then I read The Wise Woman, which is okay. The Wise Woman made me feel. I wept and wept and wept in repentance reading that. That was the first time for me that I ever felt like that before. I kept going, oh my God, I'm such a terrible person. Because he was describing this little brat, okay, this young girl, and she was just a brat and so, self-centered and I don't know, just short-sighted and just all these things. And I could just see myself in it. And I was like, it just was penetrating me right to the heart. And I thought, and there's 2 girls in this story, 2 of them. And I knew that one of them was almost irredeemable. No one's irredeemable for George, but one of them was almost irredeemable. And I kept hoping it wasn't the one that I felt like. As I was going through the story, I was like, please don't let it be her.
Yeah.
Because it really felt like me. It was a really, really, moving experience. Listen to that.
When I was first getting through Fantastis, it was just so fantastical. I really, really had to go very slowly to just even, I mean, not to understand the symbolism, because the first time it's just so hard to understand. But even to understand what's going on, it's like, what is it?
Yeah.
Like singing the White Lady out of a piece of marble.
I know.
It's like, and then she runs away, and then, oh,
I know. It's an amazing. You know what always really gets me about that book? I mean, what I really love in that book. I mean, there's a lot. There's a lot to love in that book, but the story of Cosmo.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
that one. Oh my goodness. Yeah.
I wanted
It made
to do a
me.
treatment on that. We should do that together, Eugene. Just do a treatment
Uh-huh.
on the story of Cosmo. I would love to try doing that with you once.
Yes. Because there's lots of threads there that I still don't get.
Same here. Same here.
But I totally, the first time I just was mesmerized by the feeling of it, the feeling of the story. I almost like recognize something, but I still don't know what it is.
Yeah.
You know.
And I've heard some McDonald scholars. There's a woman, her name, I just had it in my head. But anyway, she was talking about that story, the story of Cosmo, and for a long time they couldn't figure out why it was in there, because it's a story that Anotos is reading in another book.
Yeah.
But it just goes like full bore into it. Like you're out of Anotos's life and you're into the story that he's reading, and then it's over, and then you just move on in Fantastis, right?
Yes.
Like no
That was so bizarre.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm like, knowing George MacDonald, that's not a fluke, right? It's there for a reason. It's kind of right in the middle of the book too, I think, if I remember correctly. So, and I'll just tell you a little tiny bit about it, Jeremy.
Okay, yeah, I have not read it.
Okay, because this is the part that gets me. This young man goes into an antique shop, and there's a mirror up high. And the owner of the antique shop, he's kind of a magical character. And he sees him looking at it, and he says, you would like that mirror, wouldn't you? So the mirror actually belongs to Cosmo. It's his name is Cosmo. And the man is getting it to him. That's the feeling you have. And he's like, yeah, I love that. And he wants to just decorate his apartment. He just got an apartment. And so he sells him the mirror. He brings it home and he hangs it up. And his living room is reflected in the mirror. So his couches, his table, it's all in the mirror. And then one evening, he notices a movement, a flash in the mirror, and he looks, and there's a woman. And she comes in to the mirror. And she sits down on his couch. Okay.
This sounds like a nightmare from when I was like 10. I'm not even kidding. This is like saying Bloody Mary in front of the mirror at night. Like, don't do it.
It's a little bit creepy, right?
Yeah, sure.
But then he just starts, first he runs over and then he realizes she can't see him or hear him or anything. And he watches her every evening, and she's distressed. She comes in, she's crying. And then he realizes his apartment's very sparsely furnished. It's not very comfortable, and he wants her to be comfortable. So he starts to buy things to put in his apartment so that she, and every time he adds something new, she comes in and she's kind of like, oh, the room is different, And here's the thing that I'm getting goosebumps just talking about it. She realizes that somebody out there loves her because of all the beautiful things that they're giving to her.
Wow.
And he's falling in love with her, but they can't see each other. I mean, she can't see him. Anyway, I won't say any more than that, but I would love to. I've always thought about just reading it on Grail Country story, and then maybe finding a good conversation partner like Eugene.
Yeah.
Sure. Anytime. I'd love to reread it. It's pretty short, but it's
not
so
very long.
packed.
It is jam-packed. Yeah.
And he mentions that this guy, Cosmo, lives in Prague.
Yeah.
And I have no idea if it has anything to do with anything. But you know, maybe some scholars, you know, were able to.
That's probably my favorite city that I've ever been to. I've traveled a lot for one of my 55 careers that I've had. I got to travel. I've been to 17 countries, and Prague is like such a magical city. I mean, if you wake up in the early morning and there's like the heavy fog, and there's these bridges all across the city, across all these rivers, and you're walking across, and they have sculptures all along the bridges and like the old street lamps, and it's just you're out of time. It's an anachronism. And unfortunately, the last time I went, it's been a little bit overrun by tourists. So there was a lot more activity there than the first two times I went. The first two times I went to Prague were just like, it was like stepping out of time. It was so beautiful. I loved it so much. I could live in Prague, like old Prague. I just love, everything is like human scale, and none of the roads are straight, and none of the buildings are straight, and none of them are level, and they're all beautiful. I fell in love with that city, and I've never gotten over it.
So I just wanted to tell Tim, it's the story of Cosmo, but it's within the book Fantasties. So I don't know if you can find the story of Cosmo on its own anywhere, but it's in Fantasties.
By George MacDonald.
And he reads it. He reads it out of a magical book in a magical castle.
Yeah.
In a fairyland that his imagination led him into on his 21st birthday.
Wow.
This is like,
was it just the liquor store, or
no? It's his 21st birthday, and he's sitting in front of an old secretary. The old desk. You open the thing and it's got all the drawers and stuff. And he's sitting there because his father has left him his estate, and now he's of age to take it over.
Well, this is like Lilith. Wow.
Yeah, it's like that theme. It's actually a forerunner. It's like a forerunner to Lilith.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh no, wait a minute. I'm thinking of Lilith.
Oh, okay.
Sitting in, and then the fairy grandmother.
He does. It's beginning Fantastis, yes.
Okay. So in the very beginning of Fantastis, this little woman comes out, and she, she's strong-minded. She's talking to him about things, and he's like, I can't take you seriously. You're way too small. And he has this great line in there about small things. I can't remember, but it's just so perfect, that line. And then at one point, she just, she gets big. She's like, how about this?
Don't be deceived by appearances.
Yeah, don't be deceived. No. It's so good.
Fun.
But the other surprising thing about this story, especially the first part, before he gets to the magical place, he keeps wandering around this old and enchanted forest. And he gets warned by this, knight that you can really get caught by this ogre if you're not careful.
Yeah.
And it's like, and he gets it. He gets the message, and he gets warned time and time again. And you can imagine he gets caught by the ogre.
Yeah.
And then the same story sort of kind of repeats itself again when he gets caught by the
birch tree.
Birch tree was the one.
Well, the birch tree was the nice woman, But
yes. But
the ash tree was after him.
ash tree, yes, the spirit of the ash tree.
Mhm.
Oh my goodness.
Did you say
And
he got caught by an augur, like the bird,
Ogre.
like the bird predictors?
Ogre.
Oh, ogre. Okay, sorry.
Ogre.
Yeah, you were just
ogre?
that was your
No,
Russian.
auger.
Yeah,
Not.
yeah. Okay, sorry.
Yep.
That was
Sorry.
your Russian.
How do you
uh,
pronounce it? Auger.
Ogre.
Oh, ogre.
Ogre. All right. Ogre.
Yeah.
Ogre. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. And I caught myself when I read that. I caught myself. How many times I've been warned about things again and again, like it's really like straight in my face, and I still get in trouble. It's just mind blowing.
Mm-hmm.
But the way he describes it in the book, how he actually, I mean, the whole process of him getting caught,
Yeah.
it's just so natural. I mean, I would have done the same thing.
Yeah.
It's just.
I read a really interesting essay one time about, it was a paper somebody wrote about Anodos, like the story in Phantastes, and he mapped it on to the natural, what do you call that, way that electricity works. Because Anodos is actually anodes, like, and he shows in the story of Phantastes how this would literally map onto, like, and I'm really bad with this kind of thing, like a what do you call that, Jeremy?
The anode and a cathode, where you
Well,
have
just
the
how electricity
different,
travels, how it
yeah, the
travels,
electrical charge, how it moves.
and how it moves.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because of a difference in charge. Yeah.
And it's just an assumption on the author's part, right? Like he's saying, this is what I see. I see this. And here's the thing, George MacDonald had a degree in physics and a master's degree in physics and chemistry.
There you go.
He was quite the little scientist too, right? And he liked to take spiritual truth out of like physical law, like things that actually worked.
The very enlightenment of him.
Mhm.
very deist of him.
Well,
Not that he was. I'm just saying that.
Mhm.
I'm just saying
He
that's
was
the
not, like
deist move. No, I know he's not.
not.
I know, but
Like he turned it into a whole fairyland, eh? Like,
wow, yeah.
so, but I thought it was a really plausible idea, the way the guy laid it out.
Well, and in a related explanation for the audience, so I used to work on pipelines, and pipelines, because of the gas flowing through, what they realized over time is that the gas flowing through creates an electric charge that actually takes particles from the side of the pipe, and it's drawn into the soil. So it like the pipe deteriorates more rapidly than it would be predicted by oxidation because of an electrical charge that's created by the flowing gas. So the flowing gas through it like electrically charges the pipe, and it draws it in. So they put, now what they do when you're laying a pipeline in the ground is that every so often, I can't remember, it's like every 200 yards or something like that, or I don't know what that is in Freemason units, but every 200 yards or so they put a, we don't care what the
It's the same. It's about the same. A yard and a meter are almost exactly the same. Like,
no one cares though. We don't want to know what the Freemasons think about measuring things. So anyway, there's an anode that goes into the ground, and the anode is made of a certain material, and what it's meant to do is it's a sacrificial anode. So the anode, the electricity will go into the anode because the anode will sacrifice its cells, sacrifice its electrons faster than the pipe will. So it's easier for the pipe. So the anode gets sacrificed instead of the wall of the pipe. And it's just that electrical charge that's caused from the natural flow of the gas through the pipe. So anyway.
I don't know if you're talking about Jeremy's story here, Yanga, but it was. Everything affects everything. Yeah.
That's true.
There's a really great line in Phantastes when it begins, that when Anodos goes out, when he decides to follow the path to fairyland, The first thing he does is stray from the path and head south.
That reminds
Yes,
me
yes,
of
yes.
that scene in Stalker. Have you seen Stalker? Have you seen that movie?
Yeah, I have seen it. Yeah.
Okay, Eugene
Oh,
has. Have you seen that movie?
Is that
The
Tarkovsky?
Tarkovsky film?
I haven't
It's
seen any of
Tarkovsky,
his
yes,
films.
yes.
Mhm.
You have to see that
It
movie.
was a long time ago, though. I do remember like the gist. Yeah.
There's this one scene where they're in this kind of enchanted forest and they're trying to get to the center of the forest, and in the center of the forest there's basically there's been an alien like ship that's landed in this forest, and now it's forbidden area and you're not supposed to be there, and the government has it all protected, but there are people who like you can pay them as a guide to get you into the center, because in the center of the forest there's a room, and if you go into the room your heart's deepest desires are granted.
Oh,
And so people are trying to get there, but it's very difficult and treacherous, and it's
have
an
to watch
enchanted
it.
forest. So it's so good, it's so fun. But there's this one scene where they come out they've been in this enchanted maze kind of forest, and they come out into this opening, and you could see the building in the middle, and the guy just like turns away from it, and they have the way they move, the way they navigate is they have these like a nut, like a like a machine nut, like a metal nut, and he tied a handkerchief through, a white handkerchief, and he just throws it and then walks to it, and they just keep doing that. There's 3 of them together and they're traveling, they just throw it and then they all walk together and they all have to stay together, and the guy's like, it's right there, we can just go there, and the guy says, no, if we go toward it we'll never get to it.
Oh.
And they just turn and like keep going, the guy, and then the one guy's just like, that's crazy, and he starts going, and then he gets lost. Right. It's so good. It's such a good movie.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. If we go toward it, we'll never get to it.
Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah. If you,
Well,
you
it's
have
like
to go,
in Alice in
to go up,
Wonderland.
you have to go down. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Alice in Wonderland.
Yeah.
Yeah. Dante's Inferno as well.
Well,
Right.
Alice,
Yep.
you know that Lewis Carroll was actually a friend of George MacDonald's, and George MacDonald tried
I
that
have
story
read
out
about it.
on his own children before they published it.
Wow.
I was like, can you imagine? George tortured his own children with Lewis Carroll's story. Yeah.
But isn't it interesting how people influence each other? It's just there's such a mystery to it. I mean,
I know.
most of the people that we now draw from in terms of like their imagination, they knew each other, basically. I mean, they somehow, it was like an inner circle of people, you know.
Well,
I was
I
once,
learned,
yeah, go ahead.
I learned from a Jewish friend of mine that there's a rabbi named Rev Nachman from Poland around the same, he lived during George MacDonald's lifetime, and he wrote fairy tales, and I think they have like a book, they have Rev Nachman's story, it's a book, and my friend said to me, this is our George MacDonald. And I listened to one of his stories, and him and I got talking about it, and he said, how do you think that because I said, well, they were all swimming in romantic period waters. He's like, yeah, but this guy was a Jewish, Yiddish speaking rabbi in rural Poland, right? So like, how much influence would anybody else have on him? And I'm like, yeah, fair enough. I said, well, morphic resonance, Sheldrake. I said, or you could call it the Holy Spirit. Right? But I listened to one of his stories, and it was there's so many interesting parallels to like the Golden Key by George MacDonald. It was amazing. I'm like, this is actually kind of mind-boggling, that these two very distinct characters would come up at the same period of time, would come up with a story that but then again, if you're describing the patterns of reality, they're probably pretty much the same, right?
Although there, so I have a book of Russian fairy tales. As like I have a thick collection of Russian fairy tales as my bathroom reading, and there's definitely like it's like I think fairy tales are kind of like orthodoxy in that they're like wine. It's a way of making wine, but the wine that you make in different countries tastes differently because it's affected by what's in the air in that culture, right? In that area, like geographically, and because the culture is affected by the geography and by the weather, and that plays into how the fairy tales manifest, right? Like how the fairy tales and it also plays in how they resolve. Like so many of the Russian fairy tales, I absolutely love it. They just go, there's more to the story, but I need a drink right now. I'll tell you later. And that's it. That's the end, right? It's like the story goes on, but I'm tired of talking, so I'm just going to have some vodka, and that's it. This is so great.
I heard a story of I heard a story of a Russian monk who could drink anybody under the table and never get drunk.
Georgians are like that. Georgian, like Orthodox Georgians. Oh my gosh, you
Really,
can't keep up. Oh yeah. No.
Crazy.
Yeah, I really loved Russian fairy tales growing up. We had a couple of like volumes at home, and it was the Soviet times was really hard to get lay your hands on a good book. So they were rare, but somehow I was able to, I don't know who got it, but it was basically my baptism into the imagination. Just reading those stories. And of course, we had movies and we had all kinds of. Like the Soviets did a really good job of putting most of the fairy tales into good movies and cartoons. I mean, they're just all over the internet now. But I still go back with my kids, go back to those stories, and they still speak to me up to this day. And and all those characters, they're pretty pagan in what they are in their essence, but they do become like shadows of the world that comes.
Totally.
When we pierce them through the imagination, like Baba Yaga or the three-headed dragon snake.
Well, then Prince Ivan is in all kinds of right.
Oh, Ivan the Fool is my favorite.
Yeah, Ivan the Fool. Ivan the Fool. Yeah.
Oh, fool for Christ's sake! I mean, he goes the other way. He is the one that does the stupid thing, and he gets the reward at the end. By not wanting it.
Right? Yeah, right. Yeah.
Well, he's a simpleton. He's like Forrest Gump.
Yeah. It's just like he does like the little thing. There was another story too of the town fool who like he went to a party and there was a fire and he didn't put the fire out and he got in trouble for not putting the fire out, and so then there was a fire that started and he got in trouble for not putting it out. He got beaten and his mother was like, whenever there's a fire you need to put the fire out. And so he went to a different party and then there was just like a cooking fire and he was like, and he put the fire out and they're like, no. Like it was like he was always applying the advice from the former situation to the current situation, but the context was different and he never could see that the context, he just was trying to live like the rules, he could never apply it in the context. And so finally at the end, like it happened like 4 times in the story, and at the end it was like, and then his mother realized that she just couldn't let him out of the yard anymore. Like, he wasn't going to figure it out. He just lived at home with his mother.
That just reminded me of, did you guys ever see The Gods Must Be Crazy? It's an old movie.
A long time ago. I don't remember.
If Tony is listening, he knows. It's a South African movie. Oh my God, it's one of the best movies in the world. And they talk about the rhinoceroses that stamp out fires. Like you can't build a campfire at night because of the rhinoceroses That's all you know. But then you find out that the reason is because they'll run up and stamp them out. So as this rhinoceros run up, stamp out the fire. Anyway, that's a really great movie. It's about somebody in a bush plane who throws a Coke bottle out the window, and it lands in front of a little pygmy. Remember, we used to call them pygmies. What are they called now? Bushmen.
I don't know. Sure.
Very small tribal people.
Yeah.
And it drops on the ground in front of him, and he picks it up, and he's never seen a Coke bottle before, right? Never seen a bottle. Fell out of heaven. And so he thinks it's a mandate to throw it off the edge of the world. And it's his whole journey, eh? And it's so good. It's the best movie ever.
What's it called again?
The Gods Must Be Crazy.
The Gods Must Be Crazy. Okay.
Yay, look, I've got a fan. Yay.
Yeah, I haven't seen it for a long time.
It's a really good movie.
I think I saw I think my mom watched it when I was like 5 or 6. So
it was a really low budget South African movie, and I don't think they expected it to really go anywhere. And it's kind of a cult classic now. It's a great movie. Yeah. Yeah.
I was going to say that when I first read the life of St. Patrick, and there were so many magical twists to that story, and for some reason, it's exactly those fairy tale-ish motifs that drew me to stories like that. Like when he prayed, when he first stepped on the land of Ireland, and he prayed, and all the snakes left. It's just it's so simple, but then it's like a fairy tale, but it's so appealing that it's exactly how it should be.
Right.
And and then later on, when I read the stories of other saints, like Saint Brigid that you just read today, and then also Saint Francis and Seraphim of Sarov, and they talked to bears, and they talked, they preached to birds, and they preached to the wolves, and the wolves obeyed, and everything. Like it's like you step into the magical forest with an Otis through the imagination, and you actually see it happening. And then Jeremy was mentioning also that sometimes people look whether this is forensically true or not. But the fun part for me is that when you see a miracle happening in front of your eyes, you can't really tell which is which.
No.
And like I can imagine if somebody would saw Seraphim of Sarov talk to the bear, I don't know, I don't know how would they be able to describe it. What is forensically true? And it's like, it's just amazing how we have divided the world into this, kind of forensic truth or factual, and into the magical. And this is like in the book of fairy tales for children. But when you actually are in the experience, you realize it's just all one.
Okay,
there's no question.
I have to read you something, Eugene, because you're going to love this. So I'm reading this book by this Jewish guy. His name is Gershon Winkler, called The Magic of the Ordinary, Recovering the Shamanic in Judaism. Okay. And he takes a passage out of the Kabbalah that says, the Infinite One then sculpted the universe within 3 spheres: text, number, and story. Text is representative of facts, axioms, principles, laws of nature. And I'm just giving you like the Reader's Digest version here. Text is pre-planned, predestined. It is the neshama aspect of soul manifestation, or the intellective attribute of ourself. It is chokhmah, a knowing, a wisdom, and literally a sculpting. And when I read that, I thought of how George MacDonald always has these characters in marble or in stone, and they have to be freed out of it. Number is representative of process. Takes so many years for a tree to grow, leaves to sprout, so many hours in a day, so many days in a week, right? It is the nephesh aspect of soul manifestation, or the appetitive attribute of self, which connotes experiential knowing. Story. Now, here's the deal. That's what I wanted to tell you. Story is representative of fluidity, unbridled creativity, and interpretation. I may not be able to change what is fact or alter what is process, but I may be able to interpret it. And through interpretation, I shift both fact and process from the realm of absoluteness to that of relativity, from the static to the dynamic. Story, unlike text and number, is spontaneous. It is the ising of life. It is never finished, never perfect. It knows neither beginning nor end. It is both immanent and transcendent, weaving the threads of spirit and matter into a single fabric of aliveness and chaos, clarity and paradox. Story wields more power than either text or number. People are more easily inspired and influenced by myth than by fact, for better or for worse. Story is the ruach aspect of soul manifestation, or the emotive attribute of ourself. Story is bina, which connotes insight, understanding, intuition, and literally building, as in building upon what you know. Story is then the power of the feminine, the power that takes in the raw and refines it, builds it, unfolds it to fruition. Story flourishes before, during, and after life. Where text is the fact of life and number is the process of life, story is the mystery of life. Ever unfolding, ever uncertain, ever surprising, ever challenging, ever alive, and ever eternal. In other words, story doesn't go by the book.
This is good.
Isn't it?
That's really great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when he was talking about all the weaving of the fabric and the chaos and the paradox and the clarity I was thinking of the Theotokos.
Oh, yeah.
And then he says, it's the feminine. It's the power of the feminine, right?
Right. The hidden and the mystery. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I'm very slowly chewing on this thing. Like, I've only gotten to chapter 2, and it blew my mind so badly that I felt like I was manic for like 3 days. So I thought, okay, just let's go slow it down. and and so I've been trying to reiterate what I've been reading in that chapter, because it feels like so much. Yeah. But I was very thrilled with it, with that part of the of that thing.
No, that's really
interesting
beautiful.
about weaving. Yeah, it's very interesting about weaving as well. Just for some reason, I remembered I had a friend years ago in Russia. We were very young, and he stuttered, and he was pretty introverted because of that. And we would just hang out, and he would start it, stutter, and then he disappeared for several months, and we didn't know where he was. But then I accidentally saw him playing his guitar. And then there's like in Russia, there's like what do you call them? Like under the street crossings, how would you call
Oh,
it?
yeah, like an underpass or a
Underpass. So the
Mhm.
people sometimes, actually all over Russia, people stand there and play whatever instrument they can. They just wait it. And
Yeah,
somebody
because of the
smashes.
acoustics. Yeah.
Yeah, the acoustics, and it's warmer in winter, And so that's where I saw him, and he was standing there and he was playing his guitar, and he didn't stutter. He didn't stutter. And I stood there, I was mesmerized. And
Mhm.
he recognized me. I mean, I recognized him. And then I gave him some money. And then we also chatted. And I noticed that, uh, I mean, when he just stopped playing, he was still in that spirit of not
Right.
stuttering.
Mm.
And then slowly it kind of
Would come back.
went away.
Mm.
And
Oh,
then,
went
and
away.
then he went away. It went away after a while. But and then we would meet every once in a while here and there, and I would notice the same thing, that whenever he was in his zone, he would stop stuttering, and he was just smooth. He would just speak smoothly.
Interesting.
And then later he said he joined the theater, and he said he stopped stuttering altogether.
Wow.
And yeah, and basically, and for some reason, it's interesting to think about it in retrospect, because I can, even now in my mind's eye, I can see him in that under, the underpass. And it was almost like I was witnessing a miracle
Mhm.
of Mercury granting speech to someone who couldn't speak.
Mhm.
And really, I couldn't really tell which was more tangible or more real to me back
Mhm.
then,
Right.
because it really gives me goosebumps. The
Mhm.
two stories were woven together, the
Mm.
factual and the mythical.
Right.
And I could really see how the Greeks and the Romans and the pagans, how they saw the facts, and they saw the mythical behind the facts
Mhm.
woven together at the same time, and also maybe the number somehow.
Yeah.
And
And
so
the
those
whole
those
idea,
three.
like the whole idea in that excerpt that I read you about spirit and matter being brought together in story. This is always what I have noticed through having read George MacDonald's Imagination essay, because he calls that poetic relations.
Mm.
And it's always seemed, for me, it's always represented incarnation, like the Christian idea of incarnational, right? Where God dwells, right, as a human being on the earth. And I mean, that's how we think of the story. But incarnational is literally the marriage of heaven and earth. It's spirit and matter in this um like burning bush dance with each other, right? Not consuming one another, right? The one isn't lost in the other one, right? The spirit doesn't get lost in the matter doesn't get lost in the spirit. And that's what poetry does. It brings together matter and spirit, right? And it breathes, like, this is the beauty of metaphor. So much to talk about.
Well, and I was reading this guy that I really looked up to when I was younger, and I don't even share who it is, but since I've grown older, and also especially since becoming Orthodox, like I read his stuff now and I'm just like, oh man, you're missing so much. And he's talking about, okay, truth claim is something that has predictive value. So you tell me how to predict it. Like you tell me how your truth claim, how to predict its outcome, and I'll tell you if it's true or not, right? And what they don't see is that story is it's just another form of pattern. It's another structure that does have predictive ability, but it's because it's not explicit, and because the story can change and you can be surprised and you can have a surprise ending, they discount it as it having any value. And it's like, no, like that's what makes a good story. Like that's what makes a joke, right? The best joke is when you don't see it coming. And they dismiss that as not being valuable because it's not, but it has a predictive value of its own. Like the story, like the structure of a joke is still a pattern, even though the ending is not clear. And they can't account for that. And they don't see that as truth. But it's more valuable because it's more like I would much rather have a Jonathan Peugeot telling me what's going to happen in the next 5 years than I would a climate scientist telling me what's going to happen in the next 5 years. Right?
Because he's got a better grasp of the pattern.
The patterns that we live in. Right?
Yeah.
Like we live in these patterns of story. We don't live in patterns of charts and graphs. And I'm saying this as someone who makes charts and graphs for a living. Right?
Really?
Yes. Yeah. Pray for me.
Makes it all the more valuable.
Yeah. No, I'm always telling the leader, like I'm always telling our management, like we need more stories and less charts. Like we need to tell these people what we're up to and why it's important. And these charts aren't doing it. Like accountants have no idea how to tell people that. They have no idea how to motivate people. They have no idea how to excite people. You know, people are not convinced by facts. Like that's why they go to pro wrestling. They love the story. Even if they know it's story, they like to watch the theater, right? Like it's
even when they know it's fake. Yeah.
It's not fake, it's a story. There's a difference.
Well, that's right. That's right.
It's the materialist says it's fake. And the billionaire who owns WWF says it's story. You know, people really like stories a lot more than they like facts. And I've made $1 billion off of knowing that. So have fun with your charts, boys.
Well, that's what I just read in there. Like they're very, very convinced by the mythological, for better or for worse, right?
That's the danger of it, right? But that's also in numbers. That's also in words. Those are also used as weapons. Those also have two sides. Those also have, a dual nature.
So
right? A double-edged sword.
I just wanted to say, I just saw this. Sorry, I didn't see this before. In further on in this book, he says that we are living in all those spheres of existence simultaneously. So as a person, and then I think Jeremy says this somewhere here, truth is a person. As a person, we are text, number, and story, right?
Yeah.
We are a fact, a process, and a mystery.
Yeah, this was great.
Yeah.
I was really impressed by Jonathan Peugeot's interpretation of Rapunzel. Just watched
I haven't seen that one.
day. Yes. The interpretation of the hair mystery. And I'm not going to tell you the whole thing, but it's like hair represents in a nutshell represents something external that women especially can beautify, and it something external becomes a ladder for us to climb and to get to the spiritual. And basically the draw of the story, and of course it's just an interesting story, but the draw is that we have this mythical feeling ingrained in us that when we see something, it is a ladder, and when we see something beautiful or beautified, we can if we have the imagination, we can use this as a ladder up to heaven, just like Jacob's ladder. He saw angels going up and down, connecting like a bridge connecting heaven and earth.
Right.
And again, there's this incredible weaving of the external and the internal. And then he also said a really interesting thing is that if we just get fixated on the external, we will turn it into an idol. and we will not get to the story part, to the logos part. And but we also need the external because it's how to say this. I forgot the way he put it, but I just for my own explanation, I kind of said that basically the only way that the invisible is revealed in this world is through something external that draws me in. So
the beauty, and so I just keep thinking beauty, right? This is the external. Is that what he's pointing at? Is beauty?
Yes.
Thing.
Yeah. Well, there's more to. I mean, I'm not gonna do justice to short story, but he's a very amazing.
Yeah, it's interesting because I read a quote by Hans Urs von Balthasar quite some time ago. I have it on my iPad, but he says something. Beauty is the disinterested one, right? Who doesn't call attention to itself, but dances around the constellations of truth and goodness. And I just love that. It's just so, like, a theologian said that. I'm like, whoa. He was also a pianist, so he was probably a little bit of a poet, obviously. But yeah, there's something, and I think this ties in really well to what Martin Shaw's project is, because there's a wildness to it, right? And this is why in fairy tale, you get drawn in often by, it's some kind of beautiful deception, that draws you into some form of danger, like Hansel and Gretel and the witch's house made of candy, right? It's like, you get drawn in, and then you have to sort through everything. Martin Shaw told this story. I wonder what you think of it, Eugene. He told a story. I went to see him performing on Vancouver Island once. And he told this story about these 3 daughters of a king who, their father had an apple tree in his courtyard, and he forbade anyone from ever eating the apple from the apple tree because it was his and he loved those apples. And if anybody was to eat one of those apples, they would end up like 10 feet in the ground, 10 feet below, right? There was a certain distance. And much to his chagrin, his own daughters went out and ate from the tree. And they all knew the decree, but they thought, well, he's our dad. And, they all had different ways of looking at it. And in the end, they all ate an apple and they all disappeared into the ground. But they weren't just in the ground. They were in these 3 caverns. And each one of them, there was a dragon in each one of their caverns. Like, they were all separated. And in order to placate the dragon, keep it sleeping, it had hair. And the hair was constantly growing on the dragon. And so they would comb and cut and comb and cut the dragon's hair. And that way the dragon stayed sleeping. And I thought, man, that's an interesting role of the feminine, combing and cutting. Don't you think?
It reminds me of in the being tonsured as part of baptism, where they cut from the front of your head, from the back of your head, from the side of the head, and the other side of your head, in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. They cut a little part of your hair and they burn it in the censer. And the priest always says, the hair on our head is literally the only thing we have to offer. And we don't even do anything to make it grow. It grows on its own. It grows because of the grace of God, but it's the only thing that we have that is truly, something that comes from us, that we have to offer back to God. And it's that like Jonathan says, our hair is like, it's not alive, it's dead, but it's still a part of us. It's like a former living part of us that's now dead, and that's why he said like hair and horns are very closely related in like traditional languages.
They actually are the same.
And glory, like glory, hair, and horns, all
they're the
go
same
together.
substance too. I can't remember what it's called, but it's yeah.
Well, the story made me think of a barber shop I used to go to when we lived in Russia. There was this particular barber. She was a lady, and she would literally put me to sleep in minutes as she was doing my hair. She was cutting my hair. And so I was the dragon, but I was asleep. I literally would be nodding, and she's like, "Hey, wake up, wake up." I'm like, "Okay." I was like, "Oh my goodness." So that's probably where it comes from.
Maybe.
It lulls the dragon to sleep.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. But like the dragon has to be placated. Like it's like the ever-growing hair is somehow unsettling to the dragon too. So it represents, I don't know, like he didn't explain it. And it was so funny because we listened to, and then what happens is this gnome or dwarf, like Tolkien's dwarfs, they belong in the earth, right? He goes and saves the girls from these dragons and brings them back. But there's something about hair. I guess I can just look it up, and what's the mythological symbolism of hair, because he told us after
hair,
go ahead.
It makes me think first of all about Samson's hair, and also about Absalom's huge hair. I can't see the immediate connection, but there's something there. It's like when I first read the story about Samson, it's like what's going on? Why would his strength be in his hair? Is there any
they weren't supposed
other
to cut
pagan stories?
They weren't supposed to cut their hair, right? Like I think they took different.
That's right.
And the Nazarene or the Nazarene, whatever they were called. They took
the
vows.
Nazarites. Yeah.
Nazarites.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, there's a wildness though, right? So like this reminds me of the story of Merlin. When Merlin had gone wild and he was out in the forest and he had become an animal again, and his hair, and he was all very hairy. And then there was a woman who said, I can, and they would send knights in there to try to get Merlin out of the forest, but he was like this wild beast. And there was a woman who, Jonathan Peugeot told this story a long time ago. And he said there was a woman who came and said, I can get him out of the forest. And she went first, and she took a plate of milk and took it far into the forest. And he started coming, and she noticed, after a couple of days that he could smell it, and he came and the milk. And then after he had been coming to get the milk for a few days, she then took meat not quite as far into the forest, and the meat drew him, and he was coming to get the meat. And then she brought wine, and when he came to get the wine, then she caught him and cut his hair, and then he turned into, then the spell was broken, and he turned back into Merlin, like he was enchanted, right? So she drew him out of the forest with higher levels of kind of civilization.
Well,
I think it was meat first, and then milk, and then wine. I think I got it out of order.
Interesting, because he says here, remember that piece that I read? He said about the power of story. Where is it? Story is the mystery. Wait. Story is then the power of the feminine, the power that takes in the raw and refines it, builds it, unfolds it to fruition. There it is.
Yeah,
the raw. Gardener, maybe that's what the hair is. Just this raw resource that just keeps. And so, and the combing and the cutting is some kind of technology or something.
Well, it's a grooming. It's a cultivating, right? It's like the garden, Right? It's like
Yeah,
weeding the
so
garden. It's like you've domesticated it. You've tamed it. You've made it.
yeah.
You've made it pleasant instead of unkempt and and unpredictable.
Yeah, and
It's
that's what
less
he said
chaotic.
too. It's
It's still
building
beautiful, but it's less chaotic.
building with materials that you have, right? Building something with what you already have. Something like that too. Can't remember. But yeah.
Yeah, I like what Jeremy said about the wildness, taming the wildness. I mean, also the idea of a forest growing wild, like here in Texas, we have like it's like totally. I really have to have a saw or an axe to get through some parts of the forest. It's just so thick, and so thorny. It's just wild, totally wild. And but then the idea of a garden is a tamed forest.
Cultivated. Yeah.
Or cultivated, or like the idea of Tom Bombadil living on the edge of the old forest.
Yeah.
And wherever he goes with his song, he kind of combs it, and then calms it as well
Calms it. Yeah.
with a song.
This is related. When I went to St. Andrew's Monastery down outside of Phoenix, they have all the trees growing, on the grounds of the monastery. And there's this, like, they've painted like the bottom, 3 feet or 4 feet of each tree white. And somebody asked one of the monks, how come you guys paint the trees white? And he said, well, at first we were told that it would help keep the heat down on the tree, like it would reflect some of the heat. But then we learned that that's not actually true. But the abbot likes it because he said it makes it look cultivated. So we do it to all the trees now. And it's that idea of like taming the garden, like this, like
being the gardener.
Yeah. We're here to cultivate this place and to domesticate it, to bring it under submission.
And that's probably, that's where probably the power of the garden comes out the most when it's untamed. All kinds of, in a forest, there's all kinds of evil creatures dwell.
Enchanted.
Whereas
enchanted forest.
the chant is enchanted, but like where there's the calming presence, like Tom Bombadil's presence, the evil creatures flee, or they are rendered helpless, or there's some order, and then the place becomes a source of good enchantment and the power,
peace,
and the peace.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, thank you guys. I'm gonna have to go.
Yeah, it was nice to have you again.
I'm falling asleep.
No, I get it. Yeah, we're boring.
Always good to jump in.
No, we get it.
Yes.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. I really enjoyed.
No, it's a pleasure. Thanks, you.
Thanks for reading the stories. They're actually really fascinating.
Have a good night. Bye-bye.
Yeah, you too.
Okay, well, I think I'm going to call it too, Jeremy, because we're going to have a little scrap over the range extender here in my household.
No. I gotcha.
Someone's going to want that range extender any minute now.
Yeah, no, I gotcha. No, it's always a pleasure. And we had some. What's that?
I said this was good. It was nice.
Yeah, I enjoyed it a lot. I feel a lot better being here than watching the kayfabe, right?
Yeah, it'll be there for you tomorrow. Don't worry. Or
right. There's plenty of kayfabe to come. Right. There's a lot of wrestling.
Oh yeah, there's going to be a lot
of shoots and works coming up.
I think I'm going to dive into some poetry and just chill out.
I think I'm going to read some scriptures before I switch over. That's a good idea.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, thanks everybody for joining us.
Thanks for joining us. We're glad that you were here with us, avoiding the kayfabe and listening to the lives of the saints.
Yeah, thanks for spending time with us.
Yeah.
And I was really the nice thing about doing St. Brigid for me tonight was getting into that real mythological zone, It was fun to do.
Yeah.
Because there's
There's
something really,
another.
really important about that.
Yes, and it reminded me. There's another Irish saint, and I need to find his name, and I can't remember. Maybe he was a British saint. I can't remember. I think he was Irish, though. Forgive me. And I'll look him up. I'll track it down. But there was a story where he went and lived in a cave, and he was building a church. And while he was building the church, he was living in the cave. And while he was in the cave, there was a mouse and a fly and a bird that all became his friend. Did I tell you this story?
Yeah, he held his hand and the bird built a nest in it or something?
No, that's St. Kevin. Yeah, St. Kevin was out praying and he had his arms out and he was praying like he was on the cross. And he was in such deep prayer that a bird came and landed in his hand and built a nest in his hand and the birds hatched and flew away before he came out of prayer. No, this is a different saint. This is a saint who he was living in a cave and there was a fly that would walk along under the words as he was reading, and it would keep his place. And if he would start to nod off, the fly would just wait there, and he would wake up and he would start reading, and the fly would move. And then there was a mouse that while he was standing and praying, if he started to fall asleep, the mouse would bite his toe, and it would wake him back up so that he could continue praying. And then there was the bird that would wake him up in the morning for morning prayers.
I might have his story in here, because
I've got
I mean, these are not official stories, but they're really cute. I've got Saint Gerasimos and the lion, Saint Kenneth of the Gauls.
Gerasimos. Yeah, he's another great story.
Saint Launamar's cow, Saint Werburg and her goose.
I don't
Saint
know
Kentigern and the robin, Saint Blaise and his beast, Saint Cuthbert's peace. And I looked up a good number of these, and they're almost all Orthodox saints.
Beautiful.
So,
yeah. Well, I will track down the name of that saint so I can look it up. And apparently, he wrote to his spiritual father, and he told him about those animals. Now, this is the wild part of this story, right? Like, that's not wild enough. He wrote a letter to his spiritual father and said, "Hey, these animals are helping me. It's been really great." And his spiritual father wrote him back and said, "You're too attached to the things of this world."
Oh boy.
And I was like, whoa. That's a whole different level of asceticism. Wow. He's like, you shouldn't be enjoying their company so much. You're too attached to the things of this world. I was like, oh.
Yeah.
I'm not there yet.
No. I think I might have to have a little discussion with that spiritual father.
Yeah. I'd be like, look, man, if you want to pray for him to go away, I understand. But
what about God sent him to me?
Yeah, right. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, it reminds me of the story of Moses and the fox, right? So anyway. You know that story?
I don't know that story.
So there was a So there was it's a I don't know. It's an Orthodox tradition that like before Moses was like, while he was still converting, it was actually before he converted, he was like Egyptian, worldly of the world, but he was, but he was still Jewish and he still would pray, but he didn't really believe it, right? Like he wasn't fully convinced.
Because he was Egyptian,
right? And so he came across this old shepherd in the desert who would pray, and he would offer a plate of sheep's milk to God every night, and he would leave it out for God. And he told Moses, he was like, and God drinks it. When I wake up in the morning, the milk's gone. And Moses was like, okay, I'll show you. So he stays up all night, and he tells the guy, he's like, it's not God drinking the milk. And he's like, no, it's God. He's like, I leave it out, and when I wake up, it's gone. And so he said, okay, stay up with me tonight, and I'll show you. And so they stay up, and soon after the moon rises, a little fox comes along and drinks the milk and then goes away. And Moses is like, see, I told you, it's not God, it's this little fox. And the shepherd was just crestfallen and just crushed, and was like, okay, well, thank you, and leaves. Well, then later that night, Moses has a dream where he meets God, and God says, "Why did you do that?" And he goes, "What? I just wanted him to know the truth. I wanted him to know that it wasn't you drinking the milk, it was a fox." And God said, "Who do you think sent the fox?"
Mm-hmm.
And so then Moses went back to the shepherd and said,
Yeah.
God drinks the milk.
Yeah. Yeah.
He takes the form of the fox and drinks the milk.
Right.
Yeah. So
beautiful.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. I think you can learn a lot by watching the animals. You can learn a lot.
Oh gosh, yes. Mm-hmm.
So, anyway, okay. Well, I'll let your husband have the range extender.
Yeah, so you can watch the TV.
Yeah.
Alrighty.
Yeah.
Night all. Thanks for joining us.
God
Have a great election night. Make sure to go to bed early.
Don't go
so
crazy. Everything's gonna be fine. The trash man's gonna come in the morning, and the mail's gonna come tomorrow. And,
just think, you guys are gonna have a whole new government, hopefully, and you can just, look up and know that I still have Justin Trudeau.
Justin Castro. Anyway.
Yeah. Good night, all. Thanks for
a lot.
joining us.